Welcome back, Sebastian here. So time for my preview for the 2025 Dutch Grand Prix. It's been a long time since I've done one of these videos, and we're now finally at the end of summer break for the 2025 season. So first up, we're going to take a look at the Zandvoort circuit. So taking a look at the track itself, this is an old school track. It's one of the older tracks on the calendar, of course. Brought back into F1 in 2021, a bunch of renovations to the circuit, but it still definitely retains a lot of its old school charm. Now, sector 1, you have the turn 1 corner, basically a hairpin. That is generally the best place to make an overtake around a lap, but sometimes you can, if you're a bit adventurous, you can overtake in a couple other corners as well. That leads into kind of a weird kinkish straight, where you have the really pretty heavily banked turn 3, and that kind of leads you on to again, a kind of a straight that's not quite straight, but all those corners are flatter, which leads to sector 2. Sector 2, you have a bunch of really tricky high-speed corners, really long radius corners as well, so it can be really tricky to get your braking absolutely perfect for those corners. I know from playing the F1 game that I'm trying to see, I think it's turn 9 it is. That can be a really deceiving, deceptively tricky corner, that one. But after those kind of high-speed corners, again, no overtaking through here. We might see a couple crashes though. You have a short straight with another DRS zone, which then leads up to turn 11 and the start of sector 3. Now sector 3, at the beginning, you have this kind of tight chicane complex, surrounded by like a stadium section as well, and then short straight leading to the final two corners. Of course, the longest and most severely banked corner on the calendar, which is the final calendar, and of course we also have DRS through that corner as well. So that's the lap of the Zandvoort circuit. It's a pretty narrow track. Overtaking is pretty difficult, and when we'll get to my pole stats, you will see that generally, more often than not, the pole sitter will win around here. And yes, generally its most famous characteristic is the fact that it has a couple corners, turn 3 and the final corner, which have some pretty severe banking. Some of the actually probably without question the most severe banking anywhere on the calendar. So the lap itself, 4.259 kilometers, and we expect to have 72 laps on Sunday. Race lap record is a 1:11.097 set by Lewis Hamilton in 2021. Kind of doubt that record's going to get broken this year, so that record will probably stay, because next year's race, 2026, will be the last race at Zandvoort. Now, the average speed of that fastest lap is 216 kilometers an hour, which ranks 15th of the 24 tracks on this year's calendar. The downforce rating from 0 low downforce to 1 high downforce is 0.61, so it's in the middle, but leans a little bit towards high downforce. We'll see what teams decide to do, especially if the weather decides to changes from recording of this video to race day. As you might, if the range, you might see a variety of setups, kind of like what we saw at Spa and at Silverstone. Drivers will be on full throttle for 55% of the lap as well, and the corner tendency is medium, so it generally tends towards having a lot of medium speed corners. Now, pole to win ratio is 100%. The pole sitter has won every single year here, so qualifying should be very important, and generally whoever takes pole has a very good chance of winning this Grand Prix. Now, for rookie qualifying percentage, 25%, which ranks 21st of the 25 4 tracks on the calendar, but that is a very small sample just because we haven't had a whole lot of races at this track in the modern era. Now, safety car percentage from the 4 recent races that we've had, not including the races in the 70s, 80s, when of course, they didn't really even have a safety car most of those years, it is 50%, so pretty high profitability. So even though this is a purpose-built circuit, generally when cars crash, they generally tend to be quite big, and because it's pretty narrow as well, there's not a whole lot of runoff in quite a few areas around the track. So again, if someone has an incident, more often than not, safety car will probably come out. Now, of course, first raced here was in 1952, so it is one of the more historic tracks on the calendar. We raced at the circuit almost all the way up till the early 80s, I want to say, and then fell off the calendar and then came back in 2021, of course, thanks to kind of the renewed interest in F1 due to Max Verstappen. But surprisingly, kind of falling off the calendar again 2026, as I guess the organizers just could not get the funds to continue hosting the Grand Prix, which I think is a bit of a shame, since I do like the layout. I think it's a really interesting circuit. Now, tires for this weekend, soft C4, medium C3, and hard C2. Step softer than last year, so it'll be interesting to see what the strategy is for this weekend. I expect most teams will try to do a one-stop just because of how narrow it is, but we might see teams opt to go for a two-stop strategy if it indeed is the better way to go. Now, for weekend schedule, no F2 this weekend, but I do believe F1 Academy is on this weekend. Now, for Friday, FP1, 12:30 p.m. local time, and then FP2, 4 in the afternoon. The weather for FP2 is expected to be 20 degrees Celsius and 33% basically probability of precipitation. So again, doesn't seem like an optimal Friday from the team's perspective, as they will want to get the most running done possible, especially in the dry. But again, that generally, throws up a bit of a curveball for qualifying, and it means that we might have a bit of an unpredictable result. Now, for Saturday, FP3, 11:30 in the morning, and then qualifying 3 p.m. local time. Expected weather for qualifying is 21 degrees Celsius and partially sunny, partially cloudy with a 20% probability of precipitation. So again, kind of anyone's guess what the weather is going to be for qualifying. But generally speaking, as we look at Sunday, where the weather for the start time, Grand Prix with the start time of 3 p.m. is 21 degrees and partially cloudy. Doesn't look like we're going to have any rain on Sunday, but again, very, very low temperatures this weekend, so it could perhaps suit Mercedes if they can figure out what on earth is going on with their car, because we have had a couple cooler weekends throughout the European leg of the season, and even on some of those tracks, Mercedes have not done that well, so it'll be interesting to see how things go. Now, for 2024, this race was, of course, won by Lando Norris, I believe his second ever Grand Prix victory, Max Verstappen second, and Charles Leclerc in third. Now, of course, this weekend is also best remembered for basically ending Logan Sargent's F1 career. Very, very heavy crash in FP3 meant he could not participate in qualifying with a team that was already short of spare parts, and this was kind of seen as the final straw in Williams basically sacking Sargent early. It had already been decided that, Sainz was coming in for 2025, but they gave the opportunity to Franco Colapinto, and thus we now have Colapinto in Alpine. And of course, that almost certainly would not have come about without that sequence of events. Now, for the race itself, Max Verstappen had a really good start. Norris not having a great start from pole, and Verstappen led the first 16 laps of the Grand Prix before eventually being passed by Norris, and then Norris went on and won the Grand Prix by about 20 seconds or so. And to be honest, I would not be surprised if you told me that after Sunday that this was this year's race. To be honest, I would not be that surprised, but to be honest, I would probably be more surprised that Verstappen was even second, given Red Bull's recent struggles. Yes, and of course, went on to win the Grand Prix, like I said. Now, before we get into predictions and stuff for this weekend, go about the qualifying stats, I want to just talk about the brief news that came out this week from Cadillac. They've announced that Valtteri Bottas and Sergio Perez have been signed as their two full-time drivers for 2026 for their inaugural lineup. So again, I think decent pairing. I kind of mentioned that it was pretty much already known when I did one of my videos earlier this week, that would be the lineup. I think pretty decent lineup. I can compare it to some other first team lineups if that's something that I have time for. But yeah, I guess just a short bit of news from this week. Now, best qualifiers around this track, a bit of a surprise, Lance Stroll, number one, plus 26% compared to his career average, and his median qualifying gap is actually in the negative, which is, a rare sight for Stroll, negative 0.034 for him. Number two is Yuki Tsunoda, plus 25% compared to his career average, with a median qualifying gap of negative 0.212 seconds. And then number three is Max Verstappen, plus 21%. Has outqualified his teammate every time he's raced here, with a median qualifying gap of negative 0.615 seconds. So hopefully Tsunoda is well prepared, but given that both Red Bull drivers are in the top three, hopefully it's a good weekend for both of them. Now, for worst qualifiers, it's actually Stroll's teammate, Fernando Alonso, negative 28% compared to his career average, but still on average, his median qualifying average is in the negative for him, so negative 0.108. And then second is Carlos Sainz, negative 21%, a median qualifying gap of positive 0.041. And number three is Lewis Hamilton at negative 13%, median qualifying gap of positive 0.049. Now, looking at the quality model predictions for this weekend, all drivers except two basically use track data from Zandvoort. except the Racing Bulls pairs, because of course not enough data for either of them, and for the Sauber pair of Bortoletto and Hulkenberg, because Hulkenberg's only done a handful of races at this track, which is not enough for me to basically use that data to kind of modify the result. So basically it's just a median qualifying gap between those two sets of teammates. So for the other 8 teams, your drivers that are predicted to qualify their teammates are Norris, Leclerc, Verstappen, Russell, Alonso, Gasly, Behrman, and Albon. A bit surprised that the gap for Norris is about 0.2 of a second. That would be one of the bigger ones that we've seen this year, but he does have a very, very good qualifying record around this track. So again, I wouldn't be too surprised. The other ones, out of the rest of them, I would say the Alonso Stroll one might be a little bit close, but we shall see. Can Stroll finally out-qualify Alonso, or will the 14-0 streak become 15-0? Now, last up, looking at some predictions for this weekend, I think easy prediction to make is that it's going to be McLaren 1-2. Of course, one of them could crash. One of them could have a really bad qualifying session. And given how hard it is to overtake around here, a bad qualifying session, qualifying like 8th or 9th, could mean that you finish off the podium even in the McLaren. But I think I'm not going to predict that. So, and then I'm going to predict a McLaren 1-2. And given that, Norris has a very, very strong record around this track, even though I think this would be a really important weekend for Piastri, I think he really has to win, given he's only 9 points ahead in the championship. I am still going to predict a Norris win, with Piastri coming in second. Now, third spot on the podium. Last year, I think I predicted Verstappen to win this Grand Prix, simply because he had such a good record around the track. And, we weren't quite sure to what extent Red Bull were stuck in the mire that they have basically been in since then. So yeah, I'm not going to predict Verstappen on the podium just because he's been on the podium so inconsistently lately. So that really brings it down to Russell and Leclerc. I'm going to go with Leclerc given that he's been on a very strong recent run of form. Qualifying is very important at this track. And so I think Leclerc P3 is a safe bet. I think probably the first time I predicted Leclerc to be on the podium this season. So we shall see if that comes true, if I've just jinxed him and maybe he comes home P15. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. Good to finally get a preview done after about a month or so. Good to get back into the swing of things as we anticipate the final 10 races of the season, as the 2025 season, basically not necessarily comes to a close. I don't think we're at that point yet, but basically the second half of the season begins. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.